We have with us Punit Renjen, the Chief Executive of Deloitte, which is one of the world's largest audit and consulting companies. Punit, welcome. In normal circumstances, we would have all been sitting in a nice, warm conference room in a South Delhi hotel with around 300 people in the audience and talking. Thanks to the circumstances, I'm in our studio in our Delhi office, and Punit is logging in from Oregon, where it's 5:30 in the morning. So thank you very much. He's already had a client call, he said, and he's been up since 4. But still, thank you very much for doing this. Punit, I want to start off by asking you to tell us your story, because you were telling me that you're from Rohtak, and it's inspirational, right? Because Rohtak is, and we discussed this, it's a town that I used to pass on my way to college. That was my first introduction to Rohtak. And to find someone from there who's now in such an important position, tell us a little bit about your story.
First, it's a pleasure to be with you. Namaste. And you're absolutely right. I'm from Rohtak, and I grew up in Rohtak. I got a Rotary Foundation scholarship from Northern India. That frankly changed my life. I'd never been out of the country, never been on an airplane, and I got the scholarship to go to the United States, to Oregon, to study, and that is how I ended up in the United States. And then after college, I got a job offer from Deloitte 34 years ago. There were not many Indians in Oregon. In fact, I was one of the few Indians at my college, maybe the only Indian at my college. And then 34 years later, I get to have the rare privilege of running this wonderful global professional services organization. 300,000 people, 3 lakh people, 47 billion in revenue. We've been around for 175 years. And I am the first global CEO of color. Leading Deloitte. So I'm actually very proud to be associated. And as I said, it's a real privilege to be part of the #1 professional services firm in the world. But Rohtak is my hometown. And you tell me, and this is the first that I heard, that there's great bird watching opportunities in Rohtak, which is what I will try and do the next time I'm there to visit my mother.
Well, please do. Call me. I'd be happy to take you around. What did you go to the US to study? What were you studying in Oregon?
I went to the United States to study business. As I said, not very sophisticated. I'd gone to a boarding school, and my father came upon hard times. So I had to come back to Rohtak when I was 14, 15 years old. And then went, as I said, got this Rotary Foundation scholarship, very generous scholarship, to go to the United States to study business.
Let's talk about your business, which is audit and consulting. What has the impact of COVID been on your business?
Well, let me start by saying, and I think you will agree with me, that 2020 has been a miserable year. I mean, by any way that you look at it, it has been a miserable year. It's been a miserable year for our global community. It's been a miserable year for our societies. It's been a miserable year for us individually, and certainly it has impacted and disrupted business. For us, we are lucky. We have a large organization, as I said, 300,000 people, 55,000 of them in India. We have gone virtual because the first thing that we did was to protect our people. We went virtual. We've continued to serve clients. We've been growing at double-digit rates. It impacted us pretty substantially, like it impacted every business. We are still growing, but we're growing at modulated rates. So the first big impact was certainly the way that we work and the way that we serve our clients. And it has impacted, as I said, everybody. But there has been a silver lining in this, I believe. I think it has pointed out that there is a better way to address some of the issues that were underneath that we need to address. One being climate. I don't think we are going to go back to the way that we used to live and work. This year, the emissions are the lowest that they've been in a long time, an 8% reduction. I mean, I told you that I went to a boarding school. It's on the foothills of the Himalayas, and as a young boy, I could actually see the Himalayas. And then over the last 40 years or so, that view was constrained by air pollution. We've been able to see the Himalayas again. So I think there is a silver lining, and I think there's a wake-up call for us to address some of these issues around climate, around social justice and racial justice, around income inequality. And I think that's been the silver lining of this pandemic, but this pandemic has been a very disruptive force.
You interact with a lot of chief executives and boards, given your role. How are they coping? Are most companies, most large companies, have they adapted? Are some of them still struggling?
I think they have certainly adapted. They have responded to the crisis. I think everybody has gone through or will go through 3 phases. First is to respond. This was unprecedented. I think you probably heard people talk about the fact I've been with the firm for 34 years, in business for 34 years. I've never experienced anything like this, which is a health-led global pandemic that has impacted everybody. And so everybody has responded, but they've also started recovering. And I believe many businesses are on the path to recovery. But then the issue is, how do you thrive when we come out of this pandemic? And we will come out of it. With the vaccines coming on, I think there is real hope that we will be coming to the other side of this pandemic. So how do you thrive in the new normal? But you asked a question in terms of how they're responding. I believe this pandemic has impacted in the way that we work, in the way that we live and consume. And it has reaffirmed a few things. It has reaffirmed the power of technology, particularly digital, cloud, cyber. And it has reaffirmed our need as a global community to address issues like climate, like social justice, etc. So I mean, to answer your question, I think most specifically, I think most people are responding and responding adequately. But they are now starting to recover and envision how they will thrive post-pandemic. I will say this, one other thing. I mean, the ones that will be successful in the response played good defense, to use a soccer analogy, if you will, a football analogy. They played good defense, made sure that they had adequate liquidity, made sure that they took care of their people, made sure that they served their clients and their customers with distinction. But at the same time, they started thinking about playing great offense. How do you play the cards that have been dealt in the most productive way, given the core competencies that you have? And those are the entities and businesses that will thrive post-pandemic.
2021, and of course, since India's financial year is different, 2021, 22 in our case, what kind of recovery do you expect to see at the country level next year? Do you think most economies will bounce back strongly?
I believe they will. It will vary. I think some of the Asian economies have already started bouncing back, and I think the Western world, as the vaccine takes hold, I believe that most economies will recover and will recover smartly, and that is what our base scenario is as well. But there will be changes, and there will be changes that are here to stay. Let's go back to the point that I just made, which is the disruption that this pandemic has caused. Remote and flexible work is here to stay. We have 300,000 individuals, 3 lakh individuals working remotely. They have been effective at that. We have 800 offices, I'm talking about Deloitte, 800 offices globally in 150 countries. Will we need 800 offices? Probably not. Will we work remotely, 300,000 people? No. But we will work in a hybrid way. And I believe that the pandemic has fundamentally changed the way that we work and brought in flexible and more remote work. So that will change. The way that we consume. The use of delivery services, for instance, the way that it has impacted sectors like the travel and hospitality sector. I think those are changes that are here to stay, and maybe for the better, because it will make us more efficient, more effective. And then, as I said, there are certain technology-enabled opportunities that companies are taking advantage of, digitization being one. There's been more digitization in the last 9 months than there's been in the last 2 or 3 years that I believe will lead to more efficiency and effectiveness, and therefore our base scenario suggests that economies will come out of this pretty smartly.
One of the things that many people said at the beginning of the pandemic, as countries locked down and some of them closed their boundaries, was that this would affect trade, this would affect outsourcing, and that because it would affect supply chains with countries moving to ensure that their supply chains were more integrated, that they were not dependent on sourcing from other countries, that it would also affect globalization. Walk us through each one of these: trade, outsourcing, and globalization. Do you see any change happening on these fronts?
The short answer is yes. But I'm in a minority. I believe that globalization is here to stay. Globalization has on the net been a real positive for our global community. But the rules of globalization are certainly going to change. Supply chains got disrupted as a result of the pandemic. Every business that I speak to, every CEO that I speak to is going to reassess and re-engineer their supply chains. It's an opportunity for India. India aspires to be a $5 trillion economy. We are certainly fully on board with that notion. I think it's an opportunity for India to get some of those supply chains to relocate to India. And so supply chains will certainly change. But I believe that globalization is here to stay. Outsourcing is not only based on cost arbitrage, but it's based increasingly on talent arbitrage. And if you think about India, the reason why we have 55,000 people and why we are doubling down on India, the commitment that I've made is that we will double the number of individuals that we have in India, is because of the talent that exists in India. And so I believe that the rules of outsourcing will certainly change. But it is here to stay.
Tell us a little bit more about your plans in India, because you spoke about doubling down on India. You spoke about the fact that remote working would increasingly happen and that Deloitte would work in a hybrid way. And can we visualize a scenario where you have a huge workforce in India, which is servicing not just this country, but also many other geographies? I know you already do some of that now, but is that going to increase?
Well, I think you answered your question in the way that you framed it. We absolutely serve the world from India. We have, as I said, 55,000 individuals, and they really do two buckets of activities: serving the most prominent clients and governments in India, and then serving the world from India. We've got centers in Hyderabad and Gurgaon and Pune, etc., that serve the world. And our plans over the next 2 to 3 years is to double that workforce. And it's partly because, as I said, because of the talent arbitrage opportunity. We're also, as a firm, a purpose-led organization. Our purpose is to serve clients with distinction, to create a tangible, measurable, attributable impact for our clients. But it is also to give back to the communities that we live and work in. One thing that I'm very proud of is what we call world class. What we decided a few years ago, Deloitte gives about $265 million back into the communities that we live and work in. But one thing that we decided is that the most precious resource that Deloitte has is not the money that we give. It is the 300,000 individuals and the talents that those individuals have. We decided that we were going to impact 50 million individuals positively. And we were going to do this community by community. And in India, our commitment is that we will take 10 million women and girls and through education, take them out of poverty. 175 million women and girls in India are not educated. 40% of school-going girls drop out of school. And so what we are trying to work with a number of other NGOs is to impact 10 million women and girls, give them the skills and education so that they can participate in this wonderful economy that India is developing. And so that's, in addition to doubling down on India and the number of people that we have, we're going to double down in what we do in our communities in India, particularly through this commitment of 10 million women and girls that we're going to impact.
You're an advisor to many large companies and chief executives. What is the view of India in global corner rooms? How do these countries see India?
I think this is the Indian century. I really believe that. And I believe that many are very bullish about India. As I said, India has the demographic dividend. India has the talent opportunity, the democratic norms that exist in India, just the vibrancy of the culture. And I have to say, Sukumar, I'm biased. Given my heritage, I'm biased about India, but I hear this often. And I believe that people increasingly see the opportunities that exist in India, whether it is establishing supply chains, whether it is, as you talked about, using the talents of India to serve the world. I really believe this is India's century.
When you look at large companies and you look at how they've responded to COVID, one of the things that companies usually do is to prepare for exigencies, and firms such as yours help them prepare for exigencies by crafting plans. What kind of pandemic-proof plan do you think companies will move to in the future? I'm sure some companies are already talking about this. Everyone has what they call a BCP, a business continuity plan. But going forward, given all that has happened over the last 10 months, how is that going to change?
Well, as I said, that the pandemic, first off, not many people certainly have experienced what we've experienced here, just the pervasive nature of this pandemic, the global nature of this pandemic, the fact that it is not a traditional way in the way that it has impacted business. It isn't like the Great Recession of 2008 and 9. It's health-led. I think what this pandemic has done is that it has disrupted certain notions that businesses had, whether it is supply chains, it is the way that work happens, the way that consumers consume. It has also reaffirmed a few things. The power of technology, the power of digital, the power of cloud and cyber. And it has, I think, reinforced this notion that there are large issues like climate, which must be addressed at the individual, at the corporate, and at the societal level. And so I believe all of those have been factored in. And this has also given businesses an opportunity to make sure that they're looking at future scenarios based on a scenario-led approach. What do I mean by that? I'll tell you what Deloitte did. In March, when the pandemic hit, we basically said we're going to play solid defense. Let's identify the issues that we need to put in place or address so that we can protect ourselves, raise adequate liquidity, make sure that our people are protected, that we can keep serving clients, etc. And then what must we do so that we can thrive or survive and thrive through this pandemic? And we came up with 4 scenarios based on facts, and then came up with the ways that the levers that we were going to pull on what scenario we felt was happening. And I believe increasingly businesses are focused on running their operations with that sort of a mindset. That's been a big key change that I've seen in businesses.
Much more of a personal question. Global chief executives travel a lot. I'm sure you've definitely not been traveling outside the continental United States over the last 7-8 months. Would that be an accurate assessment?
Absolutely, yes.
How has it been to just not travel and manage everything remotely? Does it feel strange? Does it feel all right? Is this something you would like to continue to do, or would you like to start traveling again?
It feels strange, but it is something that I'm going to limit the amount of travel that I do. I mean, there is no doubt about that. I think it has been, the way that we are interacting it's a way that we can interact going forward. And so it will certainly have an impact in the way that I operate Deloitte and the way that I work.
Punit Renjen, thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise. Namaste.